I'm Dr. Andrew Mormon, and today I wanted to demonstrate an alternative way of taking dental scans. If currently you're using your intraoral scanner in the mouth and you're getting good results, then that's great. That's what it was made for. But a lot of times I find that I can't get the camera at the right angle, or I'm fighting a cheek or a tongue, or it's too wet, or fluids, blood, and I find it easier to resort back to taking an impression, which I'll pour up in a stone model and then scan that. So when I first got my intraoral scanner, the first crowns that I did it the way they demonstrated, and I did it in the mouth. And I found that most of the time it was very time consuming to set it up in the laboratory, and you have to plug everything in and get the computer up to speed. And scanning was difficult with the tongue and the cheek and saliva and blood in the way, and I was just unsatisfied and was going to end up not using the scanner. So I went back to what we had traditionally done and took impressions, because that's another way you can do it, and poured stone models so that we could just scan the model, and that way I can check the preps, correct undercuts, refine margins, check occlusal clearances, mark the models, so that before it goes to the lab, it's the case that I want the lab to see. My solution was to take hydrocolloid alginate impressions and immediately pour stone models that I could then later in the day check, refine, and scan, send to the lab. And the materials that I'm using have been cost effective enough to continue to use the system, because we're still less cost than taking a rubber impression, mailing it to the lab. The lab offers a $10 discount for a scanned model that essentially pays for the scanner. By taking impressions and using stone models, this scanner won't get out of date, because no matter how fast or colored or pretty the next model is for $40,000, for the next 10 years we can still use this. It'll be usable for the labs. The three benefits of the system would be: it's very cost effective. The time flow is as fast or faster than any other system we have for taking impressions. And the accuracy is the best that the industry offers right now. So the scanner that I've been using here today is the Carestream 3500. I purchased this last year. It was a closeout of new old inventory. When they released their newer scanner, which is a little faster, they dropped this from about $3,500 to about $7,000. And it is a little bit slower than the newest one, but when you're scanning the models, it makes no difference at all. So the other advantage that I have here is I can use this for the next 10 years. Technology can change, it doesn't matter. I'm happy with the speed and the quality that we're getting. And the lab that I'm working with, Trident, they will send me a model-less crown. It just comes in a case, and no models are produced. They don't produce them in the lab. It's all done virtually. And when I seat the case, I'll throw away the models that I have, because all the digital information is still stored in the hard drive. So if you want to have legal medical records, virtually the whole case is still stored for you. So now I'm going to take you through the process of how I do this. First, we always have in the morning 3 carpules of hydrocolloid plugged into the conditioning machine. It takes about 20 minutes for it to warm up and get the material liquid, and it'll hold it all day, and it's reusable day after day. When we have a crown ready to take an impression, use your cord, retraction, whatever you normally would use, and I'll come and pick up a syringe, load the hydrocolloid, have a tip on it. At the same time, the assistant is mixing in the alginate mixer the suitable fast set alginate impression material. I walk in, inject the preparation, she follows behind with the tray, and you just have the patient bite the alginate loaded tray into the hydrocolloid. Within a minute, the hydrocolloid's cooled and adheres to the alginate that's now set. I come and remove it. I go to the laboratory, do the first pour, while my assistant is mixing temporary cement. A minute later, I come back, see the temporary crown, patient's on their way. Later on in the day, I'll do a second pour on the opposing. That's not as critical. And then sometime during the day, I'll separate the two, hand articulate them, check the margins, all the clearances, everything, and then we sit down and scan it. Scanning takes maybe 5 minutes to scan the model to make a file and send it to the lab. Lab gets it maybe 2 seconds later. So generally we have the turnaround at 2 weeks, and we get the cases back far sooner than 2 weeks, so they're in the office well before patient appointment, and they do come modelless. I'll usually save the models until the case is seated, so that if I have to make any changes or I see if something has happened, I can refer back to my models, and then after that the models are discarded and the crown is seated. The last thing that I really like about this technique is I'm able to go over all these preparations before they're scanned to the lab, because they don't seem to have a lot of alterations they can make once the scan is in their system. So I'll take and wax out any undercuts that I have, refine any margins that I have, make sure I have the draw that I want, reduction, occlusal reduction, and if I see that there's something lacking, I can adjust this model. I'm going to keep this in the office until the case is delivered, and I'll see what alterations I had to make, and it goes to them already corrected. Usually what I like to do is hand articulate these cases, and usually if you have a quadrant, you'll find the wear facets line up in a stable occlusion. And if there's any reason that there's not enough teeth to get a good articulation, you can take a moose bite, trim the moose bite thinner, and do the upper scan, the lower scan, and then articulate it with that bite in there. And then when you take the articulated scan, it's going to pick up, usually it's looking for the teeth, but the moose is going to cover a lot of teeth. But since you scan some of this plaster model on either side, the program doesn't mind that. It picks up any hard point it can identify. So it'll just pick up a point here and a point here, and then set your articulation with that. So again, it's in my hands a lot simpler than doing it in the mouth. By using an older material from the late 70s, reversible hydrocolloid that gets picked up with an alginate wash, we're able to really cost effectively take very accurate impressions quickly. The set time's about a minute, so the workflow is faster than we're taking rubber impression materials. And I do a first pour. Hydrocolloid requires that it's poured within 20 minutes. We usually get the first pour on within 2 minutes. And then I'm going to go back, and the assistant's already going to have the temporary cement mix, temporary crown will be seated, checked, and person's usually pointed out the door quicker than a rubber impression would have been taken. The other important aspect is the accuracy of scanning. There's no denying that, and with the hydrocolloid, I think that we're still just about as accurate as you can be. Between the scanner, computer, alginate mixer, and hydrocolloid conditioner, it's about $12,000 total investment that you wouldn't normally have in your traditional impression taking technique. I've talked to people and they said the biggest point about digital scanning is the cost, and the cost has been averaging around $35,000 to $40,000. And a price point has seemed to be set about $10,000. Anything over $10,000 is not worth investing in a technology that continues to improve and get cheaper over time, better and cheaper over time. So the scanners that I'm using are at about $7,000. They were previously about $35,000, but as they come up with a faster color scanner, they have to unload the other ones, and there's plenty of them used on the market. And for scanning models, they're more than adequate, and don't really see a need to change that in the near future. That investment should be able to work off. The lab discounts $10 a case, so that $7,000 investment is going to be paid for in about a year and a half of average amount of crowns done in an office. The wear and tear on the equipment is much less when it's centrally located in an office or a lab than if it's being carted from room to room. So there's no disposables. We've been running it for 2 years, 3 years now, and there's no repairs on it yet. So with the type of costs we had before with rubber impression materials and then shipping and then local labs versus this scanning, digitally sending it out to a centralized lab where they're doing 50 units in a puck and however many shifts they run very cost effectively, and still sending back extremely high quality crowns because they're digitally made and they were digitally scanned. So most of our human error has been taken out of it. We have a lot of guys my age, and they're like, they're going to do the same thing they're going to do for the next 10 years because that's how they did it, and they're not going to spend $40,000, and I get it. It's just not going to work for them. And then they know that in 5 years, that $40,000 thing is going to be worth nothing. Just like a computer is worth 5 years, it's worth nothing. So if they haven't worked off $40,000, they've lost money. So when you talk to the guys who make these scanners, they know that $10,000 is the price point, but they can't make it and sell it for that because they have these huge expenses of training and support and development, and in 5 years they probably will all be $5,000 and we'll all be using them. I think this has been a very time efficient way of taking the impressions and very cost efficient way of taking the impressions. The accuracy is 100% there. It gives me a chance to check the work before it goes to the lab, and the lab does do a $10 discount for scanning impressions in because they don't deal with shipping in and out. Also, when I scan a case in, it's at the lab about 2 seconds later, so they start working on it 2 days ahead of when they would work on it if I sent it to them. And since it's already scanned in, they don't have to pour a model through their model department, send it to the scan it. So it probably saves them about 3 days getting a case going. I did have a professor when I was in dental school, and he said that you never want to be the first to embrace a technology or the last to abandon it. And that's how it is with rubber impression materials.